Picture this: shadowed corridors of Topkapi Palace, where silk-draped walls whisper secrets in the flicker of oil lamps, and the air hangs thick with the scent of attar and fear sweat, as chains of gold, gilded yet unyielding, clink softly against tender wrists. His throne was a silken noose drawn tight around the throats of boys who dreamed of home in tongues long silenced. And that shadowed night, when the emperor's gaze first fell upon the trembling line of captives, would bind an empire in threads of crimson desire and rotting ambition. Hit subscribe now. 80% miss the veiled horrors of history's most gilded cages. Drop a comment below. From which corner of the world do you watch these shadows unfold? Now, let us begin. In the heart of Constantinople, rechristened Istanbul under the conquering boot of Mehmed the Conqueror, the year 1453 etched a new scar upon the world's flesh. The fall of Byzantium was no mere clash of steel. It was a devouring, a feast where the victor's hunger extended beyond gold and glory into the quivering forms of the vanquished. Legends whisper that among the spoils dragged through the gates of felicity were not just caskets of coin and bolts of Byzantine brocade, but a harvest of youth, boys plucked from the rubble like bruised petals, their eyes wide with the ghost light of lost mothers. These were the seeds of the Ikoglans, the inner palace pages, young males torn from Christian hearths in the Devshirme, the blood tax that fed the Sultan's endless maw. 90% don't know this veiled decree. For every 1,000 warriors levied, a hidden quota of beauties was siphoned into the seraglio's veiled depths, their bodies reshaped not for battle, but for the emperor's shadowed appetites. Slow zoom on the grand procession. Dust-choked roads from the Balkans snake toward the Bosphorus, where ox carts groan under the weight of chained innocence. The boys, aged 12 to 16, their limbs still soft with the down of adolescence, stumble in ragged lines, branded with the empire's crescent moon upon their shoulders, a mark that sears deeper than flesh, etching obedience into the marrow. The air tastes of salt and terror, the Black Sea's breath mingling with the copper tang of split lips from the slavers' whips. Here, in this cradle of conquest, the Ottoman Emperor, be he Mehmed II, whose cannon thunder still echoed in the minarets, or his successors swaddled in the same imperial rot, beheld his private empire, a court of male concubines, not mere servants, but instruments tuned to the pitch of his whims. Their silks, dyed in the blood red of cochineal, clung like second skins, translucent veils that promised paradise while delivering damnation. Psychological insight pierced the veil. The emperor's ambition was a parasite, feasting on the purity it corrupted, for in these boys he saw not rivals to his seed, but mirrors of his own stolen youth, vulnerable, malleable, forever barred from the throne's fruit. One vivid sensory detail lingers like a fever dream: the emperor's crown, heavy with emeralds that caught the candlelight like trapped screams, pulsed with every heartbeat of the boy pressed against his chest, its jewels warm as fresh-spilled life. And the haunting irony? He who commanded armies to castrate entire lineages in the name of purity found his own desires chaining him to the very flesh he sought to dominate, his rule a gilded cage of his own forging. But the selection was no gentle rite. In the hall of the abode of felicity, where fountains murmured like weeping fountains, the boys were stripped bare under the gaze of viziers and eunuchs, those hallowed guardians, their own manhoods long sacrificed to the blade. Flesh tore as the whip lashed across a defiant back, crimson spray arcing like a comet's tail. The boys scream a raw, flesh-ripping agony that silenced the chamber. His body was the empire's canvas, the chroniclers would later etch, painted in strokes of obedience and pain. Quotable venom dripped from the emperor's lips. In their eyes, I see the stars I have conquered, mine to eclipse. Another, their chains are gold, but my will is iron eternal. As the chosen were led away, perfumed and oiled, their families' echoes fading like smoke, the modern relevance hooks sharp. His surveillance of flesh mirrors today's digital panopticons, where leaders hoard data like sultans hoarded boys, both devouring privacy in the name of security. Yet the cruelty had only just begun, for within the harem's labyrinth, training awaited, a forge where innocence was hammered into submission. What defies imagination is how these gilded chains would tighten around the emperor's own throat. Shadows of selection. What would you sacrifice for a sultan's favor? Your body or your soul? Comment below and smash that like if this unveiling chills your blood. Was the Dev Shirme a genius of empire or a stain on history's soul? Vote in the poll above. Deep within Topkapi's warren of marble veins, where echoes of the call to prayer twisted into moans muffled by heavy brocade, the year 1520 dawned under Suleiman, the Magnificent's shadow, a reign gilded with law yet rotting at its core with unchecked lust. The major historical beat unfolded in the Enderun school, that veiled academy nestled in the Third Court, where Dev Shirme boys, now eco-glans, were molded like wax under the flame of imperial will. Verified annals record how these youths, numbering in the hundreds by Suleiman's era, were schooled not just in Quranic verse and scimitar play, but in the arts of allure. The arch of a neck, the flutter of lashes, the silent yielding that turned resistance to ash. Legends whisper of midnight rituals, where masters, eunuchs with voices like grinding stone, taught the boys to dance as kocheks, those lithe male performers whose hips swayed like scimitars in silk, their anklets chiming a dirge for lost manhoods. Pacing quickens. Imagine the slow zoom into a candlelit alcove, air thick with rosewater and the metallic bite of fear, as a boy of 14, his skin still bearing the faint scars of Balkan winters, kneels before his tutor. Heavy sentences weigh the scene, the tutor's hand, calloused from years of wielding the lash, traces the boy's jaw, a decaying gold ring glinting like a false promise. Psychological insight flashes brief. The emperor's delusion bloomed here, paranoia seeding the soil of desire, convincing him that love was possession, and possession was the only balm for a throne built on fratricide's bones. Vivid symbolic detail, the gilded chains about the boy's ankles, engraved with arabesques that mimicked veins, warmed to blood heat as he moved. A constant reminder that freedom was a myth woven in imperial thread. The irony haunts like a specter. These boys, trained to cradle the Sultan's secrets, would one day whisper poison into ears of power. Their bedsheets stained not just with seed, but with plots that toppled viziers. Quotable lines carved for eternity. Their silks hid thorns that pricked the heart of empire. In the dance of flesh, the conqueror became the conquered. Action beat erupts every 150 words. In a surge of defiance, one boy lunged, only for the eunuch's blade to flash. Flesh ripped in a crimson arc as the knife carved shallow runes across his thigh, blood pooling like spilled ink on the mosaic floor, his gasp a soul-crushing betrayal of his own breaking will. 90% don't uncover this bloody secret. By the 16th century, over 2,000 eco-glans cycled through the Enderun annually. Their graduation often a veiled handover to the Sultan's private chambers, where pleasure blurred into punishment. Sensory overload assaulted them, the cloy of musk oil smeared on hairless chests, the sting of henna tattoos marking them as property, the emperor's breath hot with reiki as he claimed his due. Modern hook slices clean. Such systematic grooming echoes today's hidden networks of power, where the elite harvest youth for favor, chains now digital, desires no less devouring. But the true terror coiled in the blade's shadow. When rivalry flared among the favorites, jealous eyes noting a lingering touch, the emperor's order fell like thunder. Castration, not for guard duty, but to neuter threats to his singular gaze. Extreme shock moment. Under a moonless sky in the harem's outer yard, the boy was bound to a blood-crusted block. The surgeon's knife, cold as betrayal, slicing through tender flesh in a spray of arterial red, his screams tearing the night like vultures on carrion. A eunuch born in agony's forge, as the court poet later mourned. The gilded chains clanked mockingly as they dragged him away, his future a hollow echo in the palace's stone lungs. What happened next defies the stars. For in the emperor's embrace, these broken beauties would weave the noose of his own madness, their whispers turning loyalty to venom. Blades in the silk. Would you endure the knife for power's whisper, or flee into the unknown? Tell me in the comments, and like if this slice of history bleeds true. Poll time. Did the Enderun forge loyalty or breed rebellion? Cast your vote above. By 1640, as the empire's edges frayed like a hem unraveled by rats, Sultan Ibrahim, crowned the mad in the annals of rot, ascended a throne soaked in the delusions of his forebears, his reign a fever dream of excess, where the major beat pulsed in the harem's fevered heart. Verified histories, etched in the chronicles of Evliya Çelebi, recount how Ibrahim, swaddled in paranoia from years caged by his mother's iron will, surrounded himself with a phalanx of male concubines, ikoglans elevated to mahbubs, beloveds whose beauty was a balm for his fracturing mind. These were no distant echoes of Mehmed's conquests. Under Ibrahim, the practices twisted into caricature. Boys from Circassian vales and Georgian peaks herded into chambers lined with mirrors that multiplied their submission into infinity. Legends whisper of orgiastic rites where the Sultan, robed in cloth of gold decaying at the seams, commanded his favorites to enact tableaux of ancient myths, Achilles and Patroclus reimagined in flesh. Their bodies oiled and arched under his fevered command. Pacing accelerates, slow zoom through mirrored halls, reflections shattering light into prisms of pale skin and shadowed eyes, the air a miasma of incense masking the undercurrent of urine and despair from boys denied even that dignity. Heavy, stone-like sentences crush the soul. The emperor's fingers, ringed with jewels dulled by sweat, dug into a youth's hip, drawing beads of blood that traced gilded chains like tears on a lover's cheek. Psychological dive, swift as a dagger. Ibrahim's madness was a crimson-soaked delusion, ambition rotting into the belief that flesh could anchor his slipping sanity, each conquest a stitch against the unraveling of his rule. Symbolic motif returns. Those gilded chains, now looped about necks like collars of state, chafed raw skin until sores wept. A bleeding reminder that pleasure was empire's cruelest tax. The haunting irony uncoils. He who castrated to preserve his dominion sowed the seeds of uprising in the very beds he defiled, his favorites' whispers fueling the Janissary revolt that would strangle him in 1648. Quotable barbs for the ages. His harem was a mirror of madness, reflecting only the voids within. In their yielding, he found his chains, gilded, but galling. Gore-heavy shock every 200 words. Amid a revel where boys cavorted as mythical stallions, Ibrahim's jealousy ignited. His dagger plunged into a rival favorite's shoulder, bone cracking with a wet snap, as blood sprayed in arcs that painted the mirrors red. The victim's wail, a flesh-tearing requiem echoing through the seraglio. 90% overlooked this devouring truth. Ibrahim's harem swelled to over 300 males by his fall, their maintenance draining treasuries while frontiers crumbled, a microcosm of the empire's self-cannibalizing decay. Sensory barrage, the slap of bare feet on cool tile, the emperor's laughter booming like thunder over muffled sobs, the taste of salt tears mingling with forced kisses under threat of the bowstring. Modern relevance pierces, his blurred lines of domination prefigure today's abuses of power, where leaders cloak predation in privilege, gilded chains now contracts of silence. Yet the empire's blade turned inward, in a final extreme shock. Cornered in his privy chamber, Ibrahim faced the mute's silken cord, flesh-ripping agony as it tightened, his gasps bubbling crimson from crushed throat, eyes bulging like those of the boys he'd broken, his legacy a blood-soaked throne toppled by the very hands he'd gilded. The gilded chains rusted to dust in the aftermath, scattered like forgotten vows across the Bosphorus winds, echoing the motif of captivity's cruel jest. And so the Crimson Archive seals this chapter, but the whispers linger. What price do we pay for power today, when old chains morph into new illusions? Drop your thoughts below. Does history's lust still stalk our halls? Subscribe for more bloody truths from the vault, and ring the bell to never miss a shadow's stir. The archive awaits your return. Mirrors of the mad. In Ibrahim's place, chained by your own desires, would mercy or madness prevail? Share in the comments, and like if this tale's thorns draw your blood. Final poll, was the Sultan's hunger a sign of genius or the empire's doom? Vote now and join the fray. As the 17th century bled into its twilight, the Ottoman Empire, under Murad IV's iron fist and later Ibrahim's fractured reign, staggered beneath the weight of its own gilded decay, its heart a pulsing wound named Topkapi. The major historical beat thunders here. Murad IV, Ibrahim's brother and predecessor, had already carved a scarlet legacy by 1639, his purges slaughtering thousands, princes, viziers, and even his own kin, to cement a throne that quaked with every step. Yet, within the harem's velvet shadows, the male concubines endured, their numbers swelling as Murad's successors leaned deeper into the seraglio's perverse alchemy. Verified records, sparse but sharp as a janissary's blade, note how the harem's male cohort, ikoglans turned mahboubs, grew to nearly 500 by the 1650s, a silent army of beauty bound by gilded chains, their purpose not just pleasure, but a perverse diplomacy, gifted to loyal pashas or withheld as punishment. Legends whisper of a boy from Wallachia, his eyes like storm-split skies, who rose as Murad's favored shadow, only to vanish into the Bosphorus, his throat slit for knowing too much of the Sultan's soul. Pacing surges, a relentless drumbeat, slow zoom on a moonlit courtyard where torchlight dances on marble like blood on a blade, and a boy's silhouette trembles against the silhouette of a scimitar. Heavy sentences grind like millstones. The air chokes with myrrh and the sour reek of dread as gilded chains, etched with crescents that bite like teeth, clank against the boy's wrists, each link a vow of silence heavier than stone. Psychological insight cuts deep but brief. Murad's paranoia, a crimson-soaked madness, saw treachery in every lover's glance, his ambition to possess their souls a mirror of his fear that the throne owned his. Vivid symbolic detail weaves the motif. Those gilded chains, now draped across a boy's chest like a lover's embrace, gleam with the sweat of terror, their metal warm, as if forged in the heart of betrayal itself. The haunting irony twists like a garrote. Murad, who executed brothers to secure his dynasty, bred rebellion in the very flesh he claimed, his favorites whispered plots threading through the palace like veins of rot. Quotable lines for the ages. His throne was a pyre, burning all he loved to ash. In their silks he wove his doom, thread by crimson thread. Action shocks every 200 words. In a fit of drunken rage, Murad seized a defiant ikoglan, his fist shattering the boy's jaw with a crack like splitting oak. Blood spraying in a crimson mist that stained the Sultan's sable robe, the boy's moan a soul-crushing dirge swallowed by the palace's stone maw. His screams were the empire's requiem, a scribe later penned, the words sharp enough for 1,000 shares. 90% miss this blood-soaked truth. The harem's male concubines by the 1650s cost the treasury more than a standing regiment, their silks and jewels a drain that fueled whispers of revolt among the janissaries, who saw their own rations dwindle while boys bathed in rosewater. Sensory assault consumes. The clink of anklets like funeral bells, the burn of coal rimming eyes that dared not meet the sultans, the taste of bile as a boy swallowed fear to kneel. Modern hook lands like a lash. This economy of flesh echoes today's markets of influence, where power buys loyalty with promises as fragile as silk, gilded chains now hashtags and headlines binding the vulnerable. But the true horror clawed forth in the aftermath. Extreme shock moment, in a hidden chamber, lit only by a flickering brazier, a favored mahbub, suspected of poisoning a rival's cup, was bound to a rack, his flesh tearing as ropes bit deep, the executioner's blade slicing through tendons in a crimson spray that pooled like molten wax. His final gasp a flesh-ripping plea that echoed unanswered in the palace's hollow heart. The gilded chains, now blood-crusted, lay discarded beside him, a mocking relic of his fleeting favor. What defies imagination is how these broken boys, trained to love their captor, became the empire's silent saboteurs, their whispers fanning flames that would one day burn the dynasty's roots. The Crimson Archive closes this vault, but the echoes linger. Those gilded chains, rusted to dust by time, still clank in the shadows of power's lust. What cost does ambition demand today, when loyalty is bought with gilded lies? Drop your thoughts below. Does the past's hunger still gnaw at our present? Subscribe for more truths dripping with history's blood, and ring the bell to catch every whisper from the archive. Until the next unveiling, let the shadows keep their secrets, ashes of ambition. If you stood in Murad's court, would you wield the blade or wear the chains? Share in the comments, and like if this tale's gore grips you. Final poll. Were the concubines victims of fate or architects of revenge? Vote now and join the archive's reckoning.